Mountain.org. And we do welcome all comers. We've got some great stuff planned for the next couple of years, so please join in with us. Preston Lauterbach, we're so happy to have you on the show. He's been on the show before. This latest book is called Before Elvis, the African American Musicians Who Made the King. In this book, Preston goes in and lists a lot of the black musicians who influenced Elvis when he was coming up in Memphis, and man, it is just chock full of great stories. We're going to get to a couple of them. The 2022 movie Elvis sort of spurned more questions about, was Elvis racist? Did he rip off these black musicians? Well, there was a lot of ripping off going on, but it wasn't Elvis doing it. We're going to find out more about that. Y'all please welcome Preston Lauterbach. Yeah, they were ripping off people.
Stay out of the music business, you know. Leave that to the Yalobushwhackers, man. They can take care of themselves.
Well, they're notorious gangsters themselves.
Exactly.
You can tell by looking at them.
Exactly. You don't want to know what's in that violin case.
I want to get, even in the gospel field,
Absolutely.
They were ripping off some of the performers and stealing stuff and being very cutthroat. We'll talk about that in 1 second. But I want to make sure we get this story in here that happened with Elmore James and Sonny Williamson, Rice Miller,
right,
and Arthur Big Boy, I say Crudup. Is it Crudup? I'm saying Crudup. You said I'm from Mississippi, I can say what I want.
Exactly.
The three of these blues guys are driving tractors during the day. They play juke joints on the weekend, make good money. They're over in Little Rock, and Sonny Boy gets a little too familiar with one of the white ladies over there.
Allegedly.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, I'll play that game, pal. He allegedly had his shirt off in the presence of a white lady, but go ahead.
There you go. And as that situation tended to turn out back then, Sonny Boy had to vacate those premises quite suddenly and through a window. But fortunately for Sonny Boy, his friends happened to be driving down the road. So Arthur Crudup, the originator of Elvis Presley's first hit, a song called That's All Right, had the pleasure of riding around and playing the juke joints with such legends as Elmore James and Sonny Boy Williamson. And on one particular day, they were going down the road like me and Jim headed to Marshall County on a Sunday, and they were listening to Sonny Boy Williamson's radio show. He broadcast the King Biscuit Flour Hour. So they had Sonny Boy on the radio when Arthur Crudup had to pull the car over to the side of the road because it had boiled over. And when he's out there putting some water on the radiator, he hears Sonny Boy Williamson on the radio, and then he hears Sonny Boy Williamson's voice coming from some other location saying, "Man, get me the beep out of here." And what had happened was he had jumped out of this window and was hiding in a ditch. Arthur Crudup all of a sudden thinks he's losing his mind because he can hear Sonny Boy on the radio and can hear Sonny Boy on the ditch. Sonny Boy said, not only get me out of here, get in the car, put me in the trunk. So I've heard of musicians being thrown in trunks for kind of the wrong reason. He voluntarily got in, and they got out of there.
He had obviously recorded the radio stuff.
They didn't spend a lot more time in Arkansas after that.
Yeah, they never went back to look. They had recorded the radio stuff earlier, so that's how they were.
Exactly, yeah, the remote broadcast.
He's hiding in a ditch, and not only give me a ride home, but I'll ride in the trunk. That's how scared he was.
Just to be safe.
Yeah, that's heavy duty. All right, another unsung hero, somebody who brought the races together. Now we think of, well, that's a great story, but I mean, it was very, very dangerous back in those days, was Reverend Brewster at the East Trigg Baptist Church. Tell us about him.
Right, well, Reverend W. Herbert Brewster was a minister of the gospel, ran the East Trigg Missionary Baptist Church, was the composer of not just the first, but the first 2 million selling gospel recordings, including a number called I Will Move On Up a Little Higher, popularized by Mahalia Jackson. He was also a real community builder. You know, he believed in bringing people together. Over one of his radio broadcasts in Memphis on WHBQ, he encouraged white people to come down to his church in order to listen to the gospel quartets who performed there. And this was one of the, major instances of integration, which was against the law and the custom of the land at that time. And one of the young people who participated in this was none other than about 17-year-old Elvis Aaron Presley. So we fast forward to the Elvis movie in 2022, and as the King is getting himself psyched up to play what we know as his 1968 comeback special, he's saying to himself, I knew a minister once who told me that if there was something that was too dangerous to say, you have to sing it. And so this was a man who really, I think, showed Elvis not just how to be as a musician, but how to be as a man.
Absolutely, that is so wonderful. Yeah, I hope they got that right in the movie, yeah. Another gospel performer that caught my eye was a guy, I guess, Little Axe.
Yes, well, let's go with Guy. So a lot of people don't know, now that we're going to break down into Elvis Trivia Night, one of Elvis's favorite gospel singers coming over the airwaves of WDIA radio station in Memphis was about a 4'8" trans man known as Little Axe, named after his brother Big Axe, of course, who was one of the lead vocalists of the Spirit of Memphis Quartet. And you can listen to Elvis today, that thing like when he cranks up the well, you know, the big well that he launches some of his songs with. He got that type of vocal technique listening to these gospel quartets and people like Little Axe. I don't know if he knew about, everything, but he was definitely a fan. I'm certain of it.
Little Axe, the guys that traveled with him can attest to the fact that he was in fact a male, but there was some question about it. He might have been.
Yeah, so Little Axe was, at the time of his death, his death certificate, or the medical examiner ruled that he had female body parts. And so this was kind of interesting news at the time for some people, but then a lot of people who had traveled with Little Axe said, yeah, we all knew about Little Axe. He'd tell you right about it. He'd show you.
Wow. All right. Thank you for that.
It kind of adds new meaning to the name Little Axe, if you think about it.
Ooh. We're gonna cut that, speaking of axe. All right, yeah. All right, one of my favorite terms I had never heard, omnifarious. Omnifarious, tell us what that means.
Omnifarious.
It's a great notion.
It is a sense of, well, let me put it to you this way. So, the book has a couple of different layers to it. On one level, I wanted to get into and explore the histories of a lot of the originators of things that we think of as being fundamentally Elvis. His first hit, Mystery Train, which a lot of people think of as his best recording. Hound Dog, his biggest hit. Of course, the gospel influences that we've already been over. But then, there's nothing more Elvis than the pelvis, the dance moves. And the man who at least helped inspire Elvis in that regard was this absolutely brilliant musician who I had the pleasure to get to know by the name of Calvin Newborn. Comes from one of the first families of Memphis music, the Newborns. So Calvin was a guitarist and entertainer who brought young Elvis up into the Flamingo Room on Beale Street, a nightclub where his family band put on a show and an act like absolutely no other. In fact, they used to don hillbilly gear, straw hats and overalls and cowboy boots, and play country and western music, which is exactly what Elvis got credit for in inventing rock and roll, was merging black music and white music. And so that omnifariousness is this sense of the music of the spirit, the music that transcends race and brings people together. And that's what an artist like Calvin Newborn was really all about. And I think that you see that in the music of Elvis. You hear that in the music of Elvis. It's that everythingness that he brings that's so powerful.
Your chapters on the Newborn family, to me, were some of the most eye-opening. They're not exactly household names they need to be. Of course, Phineas Newborn, the brother, was incredible piano player. Then Calvin, incredible guitar player,
yeah.
And Calvin was one to jump around and shimmy, and
acrobatic, yes.
That's where Elvis maybe got the hips.
Exactly.
From
yes,
Calvin.
Exactly. Yeah. Omnifarious dance, I guess.
Omnifarious, man. That's something. And speaking of bringing the races together, I heard somebody say something about, what really integrated the South was the radio dial.
Absolutely.
They had WDIA in Memphis. Tell us about that
Yeah,
whole thing.
Dewey Phillips
playing soul and hillbilly music at the same time, which is what they called it at the time. Right?
And gospel as well. And so, yeah, Memphis was just such a in a renaissance of music in the last full year of Elvis anonymity, you know, from the summer of '53 before he made his first record in the summer of 1954. And radio was a huge part of that. You could hear anything. You could hear B.B. King playing his 15-minute live slot, Howlin' Wolf playing his 15-minute live slot, DJs like Rufus Thomas, like Dewey Phillips. So there was so much going on the radio and in live music. Elvis had so many different influences to draw from. I think that if the Presleys had moved from Tupelo to Cleveland, it may not have happened.
Cleveland, Ohio, you mean, of course.
Yeah, that's true. Not the home of the Grammy Museum, right?
Well, you make the point that, and the arguments have been made, again, Elvis was a ripoff, he was the white guy making money off these poor black guys and all, and that has happened all through rock and roll blues, even in the gospel field. But your book does a great job of bringing out these artists. Little Junior Parker, if you're not a fan of his, check out Little Junior Parker. You're a huge fan because he's all over this book.
Little Junior is tremendous. He is the author and the original recording artist of the song Mystery Train. And when Sam Phillips, Elvis's first producer at Sun Records, was asked, what's the best thing you ever recorded? He didn't hesitate, Mystery Train. And not by Elvis, by Little Junior Parker. Junior, and he came from Coahoma County down in Bobo. And his story is almost like a parallel universe Elvis. Lived fast, died young, left behind a tremendous body of recordings. I mean, masterpieces in rock and roll, in R&B, in soul, in funk. He did everything, and he was a tremendous artist. And you know, the legacy of Mystery Train with Junior is unusual because he didn't give a darn about it. A lot of people thought that it was this sort of mythical piece of work, this masterpiece. But for Junior, since it didn't hit with his particular audience, he had to move right on to the next thing. So for as hung up as the culture has been with Mystery Train, there's a movie called Mystery Train, there are books called Mystery Train, obviously the song. The guy who came up with it, kind of a shrug.
Yeah, very cool. Well, but the point is, the point you make in the book, toward the end, is you bring all this together, and the idea that all these black artists, there was an opportunity to be asked about Elvis, not by you in all instances, but interviewers would ask him, hey, what do you think about Hound Dog being so big, and he's making all, and that's all right, Mama, and you wrote it, he's making all the money, and almost to a person they said, you know, whatever will be, that's what Crudup said.
One of the things, there's a couple layers going on with the book. You have the stories about the musicians getting screwed, the stories about the musicians just having fun out on the road, driving around, drinking whiskey and telling stories. But there's something else going on more, I think, on more of a spiritual level with these stories. And that is that these originators really need to be liberated. And we have to stop seeing them as victims. They lived their own lives. They lived in their own independent way. My favorite story about Big Mama Thornton, the original recording artist of Hound Dog, which I think anybody in the world would associate with Elvis Presley, was her and a fellow by the name of Charlie Musselwhite, who y'all may have heard of.
Oh man, we love him, yeah.
Riding down the road together, passing a bottle of Old Whiskers, which is their little code name for Old Granddad whiskey. And Big Mama was driving and drinking and smoking and talking and passing the bottle back and forth with Charlie, and might have sort of lost focus a little teeny bit when she swerved off the road, plowed into a cone, yanked the car back into the lane, and kept on going. Well, Charlie's got white knuckles at this point and is trying to talk to her about it and say, Big Mama, you need me to drive? And she said, why? And he said, that cone you hit back there? She said, I meant to hit that cone.
That's exactly right. All right, speaking of old pals and taking off your shirt.
Last time I was here,
quickly.
Okay, last time I was here, somebody gave me something, and it has been close to my heart ever since.
All right.
This came from Ron Shapiro, who is not here in the flesh, but is never far from us in spirit. This, to me, is the power of audience, okay? Because not only did he put clothes on my back, but he predicted this book. I didn't even know I was going to do it at the time.
Wow. Preston Lauterbach, y'all, we love him. Before Elvis, the African-American musicians who made the king. Preston will join us after the show and sign copies of Before Elvis. A lot of fun. Great, great read. And for our radio audience, or for some in the back, the t-shirt depicted Elvis and B.B. King, both as very young men on Beale Street. I believe an Ernest Withers photo. And of course, I asked Preston, I said, well, knowing Ronzo, he just ripped the photo off the internet. He never paid any royalties. He said, oh no. He went up to Memphis and met with Ernest Withers, and they cut a deal, and he got complete permission to make those t-shirts. And I said, man, Ronzo's slipping. But I love that. And great shirt, great book, and always fun to be reminded of Ronzo. And you